I was the neglected daughter. After my success, I bought a house for my grandparents, but my family stole it. I made them pay for everything they have done. Hello, my name is Jessica, and I'm going to tell you a story about me and my family. You know, when I look back on my life, there are two kinds of memories. The ones I carry like delicate glass, bright and fragile, and the ones I keep tucked away like old, thorny vines I refuse to let climb up again. My childhood falls into the latter. I don't say that with bitterness, not anymore. Just clarity. Because clarity came to me with time, distance, and a whole lot of truth I had to carve out on my own. I was the eldest of three daughters. My twin sisters, Emma and Ellie, were born 4 years after me, and from the moment they took their first breath, it felt like I vanished. My parents, well, let's just say, if you asked them to talk about their kids, they could go on for hours about Emma's cute smile or Ellie's sparkling personality. Me? I was the quiet one, the one who read too much, the one who always asked questions and gave the right answers, but they never noticed. Despite it all, I worked. I pushed myself. I found solace in my books, in late-night studying, and in dreams that stretched far beyond the suffocating little town we lived in. When I got that scholarship to a university all the way across the country, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. College was a revelation. I became Jessica there. Just Jessica. Not the older sister, or the quiet one. Just me. I found friends, mentors, and a sense of freedom I didn't even know I'd been craving. And once I graduated with honors, I was offered a position at a prestigious firm, one of those sleek, glass-walled places with skyline views and people who wore ambition like cologne. The beginning was tough. Everyone there came from connections. Big last names, Ivy League ties, legacies. I was the small-town girl from nowhere with a scholarship and a solid resume, but not a single thread in the web of office politics. I worked harder than anyone else. I got in early, stayed late, and absorbed everything like a sponge. Every contract, every meeting, every uncomfortable silence between executives. One night, around midnight, I was still in the office combing through a tangled merger case that one of the senior analysts had botched up. He'd gone home already. Typical. The numbers didn't make sense, and if we submitted that report, it could have cost our client millions and our firm its reputation. I could have looked the other way. It wasn't my assignment. But instead, I rolled up my sleeves and started reworking the entire thing from scratch. 3 hours later, I walked into our VP's office. Yes, at midnight, with a corrected version and a list of red flags. He looked at me like I was either crazy or brilliant. Maybe both. That was my turning point. The next morning, my name was the first thing whispered in the glass conference rooms. A week later, I was reassigned to a higher profile account, and the senior analyst whose mistake I fixed. He was quietly transferred to a side office in another department. But the real breakthrough came 6 months after that. There was a deal on the table between two corporate giants in the retail sector. The whole office was buzzing. It was the biggest potential merger we'd ever handled. Everyone wanted in. It was cutthroat. Interns were offering coffee like their lives depended on it. Associates were practically camping out in the senior offices, hoping to get a piece of it. I didn't beg. Instead, I started researching. Not because I thought I'd be invited in, but because I knew that someday someone would ask a question and I'd be ready. I dug into both companies' histories, read obscure trade reports, industry gossip, even listened to investor calls from 5 years ago. I found something no one else noticed. One of the companies had a subsidiary that was tied to an overseas legal dispute. If it wasn't addressed in the merger, it could result in massive tax penalties. So I drafted a report. A quiet, concise summary with bulletproof sourcing and projections. Then I left it on the managing partner's desk. I didn't sign my name. But he knew. The next morning, he called me into his office. No one else was there. He sat behind this massive oak desk, a fortress of power, and said, "You just saved us millions in liability." Then he leaned back, gave me this look I'll never forget, and added, "You don't belong where you are right now, Jessica. Let's fix that." From that day on, I wasn't just the girl who worked hard. I was the one who saw things, who knew things. They gave me more responsibility, bigger clients, more complicated problems to solve. I wasn't just climbing the ladder, I was rebuilding it as I went. Within 3 years, I was leading a team. 5 years, I was a senior strategist. And by the time I hit 30, my name was being floated around in boardrooms. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't post selfies or brag about my title at parties. I just did the work. Quietly, powerfully. And maybe that's what made it so satisfying. Because while my family was still throwing birthday parties for every half-accomplished goal my sisters managed to stumble into, I was sitting across from billionaires, advising them on how to keep their empires from collapsing. I had built something real, something mine. They never asked about any of it, and I never offered. The only people who ever truly believed in me were my grandparents, my father's parents. They lived in this rough, crime-riddled neighborhood, but they made it a home. Every summer I could, I'd visit them, and they'd sit me down with tea and warm eyes and tell me, "Jessica, you're going to change the world." When I was a child, drowning in a home where I was invisible, their tiny house felt like the only safe harbor I had. Grandma would make animal-shaped pancakes and hum old songs while brushing my hair. Grandpa let me break apart old electronics and taught me how to fix things with my hands and my mind. They didn't just love me. They saw me. When their health started declining, I knew what I had to do. I bought them a house. A beautiful one. Quiet street, garden, close to parks and doctors, just a few blocks from my parents. I hired a kind, round-cheeked woman named Carla to help with daily needs. I flew in, packed their things with care, and set up the new place like a sanctuary. My parents didn't say thank you. Not once. 8 months passed in a blur of work. I called my grandparents, but they always seemed off, evasive. Then I got a call from an old high school friend, Melissa. She had that tone people get when they don't want to be the one to ruin your day. Turns out, not long after I left, my parents moved my grandparents out of the house I bought, back to their old neighborhood. Why? Because their house was nicer, newer, bigger, and they decided they deserved it more. My sisters moved in too. They threw parties every weekend, wild ones, trash on the lawn, loud music, broken furniture. My house was trashed. I flew back without telling anyone. Drove up the street at midnight and parked down the block. And there it was. My house. Lights flashing inside. Music thumping. A stranger throwing up on the rose bushes I planted with my grandma. I stood in the dark, shaking. Not from sadness, from fury, from betrayal. That night I made a decision. I was done being quiet. Over the next year, I crafted a plan so careful, so perfect, it would have made my old strategy professor weep. I kept my distance, but I started making connections. Subtle nudges. I knew the family business was struggling. It had been for years. My sisters were barely competent. So I made sure certain opportunities came their way. Investment leads that were just too good to be true. Partnerships with strings they couldn't see. And they fell for every single one. Within a year, their company was bleeding money. Lawsuits, audits, debt collectors. And while that chaos unfolded, I worked on the second part of my plan, the public part. I sent anonymous tips to the local news about the wild parties at the house with the rose gate. Photos, videos, police reports. And then the story broke. Respected local family hosting illegal parties in a stolen home meant for elderly grandparents. The shame was nuclear. Sponsors dropped the business. Clients fled. Within weeks, the company declared bankruptcy. Their house, foreclosed. The final twist? I had my agent buy it quietly for pennies. And when they found out, they came to me in tears, pleading, my sisters sobbing like children, my parents stunned. That's when I told them. Everything. How they neglected me. How they made me feel invisible. How they exploited the one good thing I gave them. For my grandparents. And they didn't say sorry. Not once. Just excuses. I told them to leave. They moved out of town. I haven't heard from them since. The house, my house, was gutted, deep cleaned, restored. I moved my grandparents back in with full-time care and a garden bench just for them under the lemon tree. They were happy there. Safe. Cherished. I made sure of it. And me? I still live a quiet life. Still drive my same car. Still keep my victories tucked in drawers and not on walls. I stayed out of the spotlight because I never needed it. But I never forgot. I never forgot who I was, or who I became despite everything. I'm telling this story now because just a few weeks ago, my grandparents passed away. Peacefully, one after the other, like they couldn't bear to be apart for long. Carla, their caregiver, called me in the middle of the night with tears in her voice. I flew out the next morning, and the house felt quieter than I'd ever known it. But not empty. No, just full of memory. So that's why I'm writing all this down. For them. For me. For anyone who ever sat alone at the dinner table while others laughed without them. For the ones who learned how to shine in the shadows. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fire. It's becoming everything they said you'd never be. And doing it with grace, with patience, and in the end, with peace. Rest in peace, Grandma and Grandpa. You were the only ones who knew the whole story. Now, everyone else finally does too.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories like this one.